Good morning. This is an extra class for the N batch and one topic called the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, which was a part of layer 2 and as a case study has to be taught to you. I must also make it very clear that you will not get a question on the analysis of the CAA in the mains directly, primarily because it's too controversial and also because the government has really not implemented it in the spirit that it originally desired to. But you could definitely use this as a correlative example on law and ethics across the various dimensions of your syllabus. Okay, so let us start. At the outset, I must make some conclusions so that we are able to understand exactly what it is that we are referring to. Okay, now let's start. When we look at the issues around CAA and we look at the issues around CAA and NRC, let's understand what is it that we are referring to and let's understand where are the problems that we are really getting into. Okay, the basic conclusions that we will draw right at the very beginning of our class is the CAA 2019 in itself, there are some good things and there are some bad things. But when the CAA gets coupled with something called NRC, then it becomes a largely questionable idea. So this is a discussion not just about CAA, but this is a discussion about the CAA plus NRC as we would understand both of them to be. Okay, so let's pay some attention on this and let's figure out what it is that we are referring to. Now, the Citizenship Amendment Act. This is the Act of 2019, which means it was enacted in 2019, right? Now, this is of course amending the Citizenship Act of 1955. As you know, this is one of the primary legislations regulating citizenship in the country, and an amendment here would have legislatively required a simple majority of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Now, what is it that the Citizenship Act really tries to do? Let's understand this. The Citizenship Act basically does two things. First, it changes the definition of illegal migrants, and second, it gives certain changes to the naturalization process of acquiring citizenship. Now, as you would know, naturalization as a process is defined under the Citizenship Act itself, and illegal migrants also have been defined under provisions of citizenship by birth, wherein the current provision, the most recent provision, is that if you are born after 2003, then one of your parents is an Indian citizen, and that means you're born in, so you're first born in India, one of your parents is an Indian citizen, and the other is not an illegal migrant, is not an illegal migrant. This is where the term illegal migrant has been defined. Now, who is an illegal migrant? As per the current law, An illegal migrant is somebody, first, who is traveling in India without valid travel documents, and secondly is somebody who's staying in India beyond the period of stay which has been authorized. If anybody is doing either of these two things, then the person would be termed as an illegal migrant. Now, this definition is going to slightly be changed. There is going to be an exception which is going to be given to this definition. So, when we look at the definition of illegal migrants, we understand that illegal migrants are people in India who are not Indian citizens and are living in India without valid documentation. Now, I hope you understand that the broad journey here is that you have to be a legal migrant in India, then only when you are eligible to apply for Indian citizenship, then you are eligible to apply for Indian citizenship. Okay. Now let's pay attention to what we are discussing. Let's understand what is it that we are referring to. Okay. So let's spend some time here. Okay. This is the law. Now there is going to be an exception which is going to be added to this law in 2019. That exception is going to say that anyone who illegally entered India before 31st December 2014, and this anyone is basically a non-Muslim from three countries, A, B and P. Easy way to remember is this: Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan. So any non-Muslim from Afghanistan, Bangladesh or Pakistan who illegally entered India before 31st December 2014 will no longer be considered illegal, will be automatically considered as a legal migrant, and all pending cases against them as they were illegal migrants will be dismissed in the first place. Okay, they will be immediately converted into legal migrants. Now you must understand certain permutations, combinations here. And you must also understand that the law does not say non-Muslims. The law mentions all other religions apart from Islam. So automatically it means non-Muslims. So let's understand certain repercussions of this law. This means, for example, let us say a Hindu from Afghanistan entered India illegally in 2012. this person will now be considered a legal migrant. Let us say a Sikh from Bangladesh illegally entered India in 2011. This Sikh person will become a legal migrant. Let us say a Buddhist from Pakistan illegally entered India in 2013. This person will now become a legal migrant. Okay. What if, let us say, a Muslim from Pakistan illegally enters India in 2010? This person will continue to be an illegal migrant. Let us say a Hindu from Bangladesh who is an illegal migrant entered India in 2019. Because the cutoff date is after 2014, this person will still be considered an illegal migrant. Okay. What if an Hindu, let us say, what if a Sikh from Afghanistan illegally enters India in 2021? That Sikh person is still going to be an illegal migrant. Okay, clear on this? So it basically means 2014 is your cutoff date. If you are a non-Muslim who's entered India before 2014 from the three neighboring countries Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan, you will no longer be considered an illegal migrant if you are an illegal migrant, and then you can automatically become a legal migrant, and you will be considered a legal migrant, and then we'll see whatever way you can become an Indian citizen or not. This is the basic law. Now this is the first layer of the law. Now what happens after the first layer? We now look at certain changes to the naturalization process. We now look at certain changes to the naturalization process. The changes that have been recommended to the naturalization process is, like for example, if you are applying for citizenship under naturalization, you should have lived in India, for example, for 11 years. Now we are going to change this timeline for the exception that we have created in 2019. We are going to change this timeline for the exception that we have created in 2019. So which basically means that for everybody the naturalization time is 11 years, but for non-Muslims who have entered India in 2014 from Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan, now that they have become legal migrants, they can directly be eligible. They can become a naturalized citizen if instead of 11 years, they have spent 5 years since their entry into India. If you note, the last person who would have come in 2014, and if you add another 5 years, this makes it 2019, and both 2014 and 2019 are actually election years. Very, very interestingly. Okay. Now this means, for example, how many years is it going to take? For example, let us say a Hindu from Pakistan who had illegally migrated in 20 say 20. This person an illegal immigrant in 2020, right? This person will still take 11 years because the cutoff date was 2014. But if the same person, the Hindu from Pakistan, who was an illegal migrant, who entered India in 2014, will only have to show residency in India for 5 years because now you have become a legal migrant. And by the way, in the first scenario, this person will actually not even be eligible because this person will continue to still be an illegal migrant. But what if a Hindu who from Pakistan is a legal migrant who's come to India in 2020, this person will require 11 years because this person is still an illegal migrant because you came to India after 2014. That's the basic idea. This is what the Citizenship Amendment Act wants to do. It wants to make non-Muslims from Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh legal migrants and give them a faster time period to become Indian citizens. Now this of course has two sides to the story. The two sides to the story are that boss, this citizenship amendment that we are referring to, there are certain benefits of it. The advantages or the justifications given by the government is that we are looking at a larger role to play in South Asia and we want to provide a safe haven for persecuted minorities in our neighboring countries. And the government says that there are several reports where Hindus, where non-Muslims are not given equal rights and often discriminated against in the neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Pakistan. Okay, so that's the first reason. Second reason is what you're basically doing is you're reducing their waiting time. You're basically reducing their waiting time from 11 years to a lesser period. Okay, from 11 years to a lesser period. Third, it will also help the government very clearly distinguish between legal and illegal migrants because now you would have given some clarity on their status and therefore you can very easily target your schemes accordingly. But there are certain disadvantages also, or there are certain issues or concerns also. First, when you are giving such a large population the status of a legal migrant and also looking at ensuring that they become Indian citizens, while they may add as loyal vote banks, this is going to add to the already increasing welfare burden of the country. And we know that India spends on welfare subsidies more than most other countries of the world. And this is going to be a larger expenditure that we will have to live with and bear the consequences of. Second, we must also understand that these migrants who have recently become legal migrants may not be equally distributed across all the states of India and they may be concentrated in a few pockets, and therefore this is going to of course affect federal interests and also have a little bit of local and political resentment from the rest of our federal units. Third, whether we like it or not, we must understand that this is a law primarily based on religion. I understand that it is not affecting an Indian citizen at all because we are talking about people who are not Indian citizens. But we must understand that by doing this, by ensuring that we will only give faster resolution and faster help to people who are non-Muslims is a degree of a religious bias in the country, right? And that is something which is a fundamental problem. We will also understand through the later course of our classes that this law, which discriminates on the basis of religion, is not a proper law, or could be argued as an improper law, as it violates Article 14, where two classes of people are treated unequally before the law, and that right is available to citizens and non-citizens as well. And at the same time, religion is something which is freely available to all people of the country, whether they are citizens or foreigners. Okay, so this is the third point of issue. And fourth, if you're going to ask people to sort of prove their stay in India and all of those things, most of these people who have been forced or who've come to India do not necessarily come from the uplift or the privileged sections of society. In fact, come from those areas of society which are so disadvantaged in their own right that it is genuinely very unfair to ask them to sort of disclose certain documents, right? So this of course is the case. Now we must understand that these provisions will be applicable to the entire territory of India except a few areas which have been also mentioned in the law. Now these areas are not, or these two provisions will not be applicable uh, to certain special areas which have been mentioned in a constitutional schedule which largely deals with tribal areas, right? These are the tribal areas which have been mentioned in the sixth schedule of the country. So this law is not going to be applicable to the sixth schedule, and it is not going to be applicable to the areas which are identified under the inner line permit scheme. Inner line permit is a scheme primarily concerning areas in the northeast where you require special permission to access those areas if you are not an original inhabitant of that area. Now, this is too factual to be asked in the prelims, but Schedule 6 largely consists of the tribal areas of states that you can remember as AMTM, AMTM, Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, Mizoram. Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. And it's not the entire state, it is the areas in these states. Like for example, in Assam, you would have heard of the Karbi Anglong area. In Meghalaya, for example, you would have heard of the Garo Hills, the Chakma district in Mizoram, and the Tripura tribal areas district. Apart from this, the inner line permit areas in some of the northeastern states such as Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram, Nagaland, and I think now Manipur. I'm also not sure, but I think Manipur also comes under inner line permit. So these are some of the areas that this law will not be applicable to. This is largely because these areas are given special powers given the indigenous populations that are residing in those areas. Okay, so this is the Citizenship Act. If you are not a citizen of India, this does not really concern you. Is this a morally questionable legislation? Yes. But is this a legally questionable legislation? No. And this is something which is very, very clear. Now we must understand the applicability of this, and let's understand something completely unrelated. The other side of the story which is going to merge here, and that story is the story of the NRC. And we'll come to the story of the NRC, but we'll first understand where does NRC start from. You see, there are basically, we are looking at enumeration of people. The largest enumeration of people is called the census. Now, the census, as you would know, is a decadal exercise, which means it is conducted every 10 years, right? Which means it is conducted every 10 years, right? The last census happened in 2011. We were not able to conduct the 2021 census largely because of the pandemic. And the 2011 census that we are talking about, who are we counting? We are counting all people in India, all people residing in India, all people residing in India, and it's an approximate exercise. So for those of you who would have had censor officials visiting your house, they would have never counted the exact number of people in the house. They would have just asked one member, okay, approximately how many people are here. And for example, in the 2011 census, a total of 29 questions were asked to the households of the country. Total of 29 questions were asked to the households of the country. And what were these 29 questions? They included, for example, the age, the sex, the marital status, the number of children, the occupation, um, whether they belong to a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, what is their birthplace, what is their mother tongue, what is their religion, what is their disability, and so on and so forth, like a very large number of things. But this was an approximate exercise covering a very broad range of information. For example, if you read any government document which says, you know, India's literacy rate is about 74%, we are able to calculate literacy rates from census only. Or, for example, we are able to calculate sex ratios from census only. So, when we say India's literacy rate is 74%, this does not mean 74% of the Indians are literate. It means 74% of the people living in India are literate. Okay, so census is a very broad exercise. And how does this work? It works in three layers. There is a national data, there is state data, there is district data, and the last stage is the house to house enumeration. The house to house enumeration. Okay, now this is what is called the census, right? Now let's understand NPR. Now, what is NPR? NPR is basically a subset of the census. This was an idea which was introduced in the last 10-15 odd years, wherein we take information of the people instead of residing, usually residing people, again not citizens, usually residing people, and we do this we integrate this in the census itself, and this happens in the house to house enumeration phase, where we take similar demographic, but we also take biometric details. So this is right before Aadhaar. That is why NPR sounds a lot like Aadhaar. Okay. And that is why the UPSC is also asked in the mains question, what is the point of having two similar schemes which essentially do the same thing? And that is why NPR today has become very redundant. Some of you may have NPR numbers. If you still see bank forms, some of the bank forms still ask you for your NPR numbers. Most of us will not have NPR numbers, right? Today, of course, this becomes a different exercise. So NPR is nothing but a list of usually residing people in the country. And what is usually residing people? This means they've been living in one place for 6 months and they intend to live here only for another 6 months. So NPR today becomes redundant because the government introduces a new program called Aadhaar. But NPR is essentially a list which is taken out as a subset of the census, where we know, acha, in this area these are the exact number of people living, so that the schemes that we are supposed to release, the funds that we are supposed to release, we are saying, oh, this for example district has such a population as per the census, but what is the population which is actually living in that district? That is how you will actually release your MG Narega funds, based on the data that has been given to you for that specific population. And NPR then becomes the base for something called NRC, which is a list of Indian citizens. A list of Indian citizens. So this is actually the subset of how this works. Now, as far as the legality of all of this is concerned, you see, the census, of course, is absolutely a legal exercise. We've got something called the Census Act of 1948, which allows for the census to happen. Okay. And as far as NPR is concerned, now you must understand that NPR is something which is a mechanism which has been outlined in the Citizenship Act. The origin for NPR, the legislative affirmative for NPR, is from the Citizenship Act, where we have certain citizenship rules that are framed by the Home Ministry, right? And then the NRC is something which was through an amendment which was added to the Citizenship Act in 2004, wherein you were supposed to have something called a National Register for Indian Citizens, right? And of course, the Director General for the Census will also, or the Registrar General for the Census, is going to be the same person for NRC. Now, what you must understand here is the context. In India, it was only in the 1951 census that a full all India NRC was undertaken. This has only happened once. It has not happened again. It has only happened once. An all India census and all India NRC has only happened in the very first census of India. And all India NRC has only happened in the very first census of India. Now let us understand where is the problem, what is the issue, right? Now the issue, actually from 1951 nobody cared, but in 1971 when we had the liberation war, which is when Bangladesh was created and it became Bangladesh from East Pakistan, and of course India was playing a massively supportive role in the process. It is around this time that there was a mass movement or a mass migration of people from Bangladesh to India and to the neighboring states of India. To the neighboring states of India. These states included Assam, West Bengal, Tripura, etc. Issues were particularly problematic in Assam, right? Now, why were they problematic in Assam? Because this led to a lot of social, political and economic issues. Now, what happens is, when there is such a mass movement that happens, and we understand most of the people who would have migrated would have belonged to the Islamic religion. Now, let's understand, when there is such a mass movement, why does Assam become troubled? The social impact is that this created a lot of identity crisis amongst the original inhabitants of Assam, the indigenous population of Assam. Secondly, there were also issues of environmental degradation, because these masses of people obviously had to live in temporary settlements which encroached upon the green cover or the environmental area of Assam. Thirdly, this also, given the nature of religious conflict, also caused a lot of community tension, in the state of Assam, right? Then, of course, there was a financial and economic impact, wherein these people were willing to work at lesser rates, at lesser daily wages, thereby causing a lot of economic impact, taking away low-end jobs, and therefore native workers were not able to find the right amount of jobs, right? And lastly, of course, this became political in nature. There were issues of insurgency and terrorism. Political outfits started coming up here. Okay, so this became a massive movement, and people started having an issue with the entire process, right? Okay, now Because of this, a petition was filed in the Supreme Court. Now the Supreme Court said, what is the problem? People said that these people have come to Assam and they are using resources which are from which are Assamese resources. Supreme Court said, okay, but what is it that you want? We want Assamese resources and governmental resources only be for Indian people, not for people who have migrated illegally. Nowadays they have ration cards, they have voter cards, they are getting all benefits. How is that fair to the rest of us? The Supreme Court said, fair enough. If that is the case, then let us figure out exactly. This is also around the same time in 2014. Let us figure out exactly who the Indian citizens in Assam are. So the Supreme Court ordered for an Assam specific NRC to be conducted in 2014. Now, bad luck for the government. This report was released in 2019, wherein several lakh people, about 19 lakh people, were on that list of people who are no longer no longer Indian citizens. So about 19 lakh people were excluded. So what were the basic guidelines? The basic guidelines were that first, when you have to conduct Assam specific NRC, which means you have to find out who the Indian citizens are in Assam, and these Indian citizens have to have some pre-1971, pre-liberation sort of identity. So either your name or your relative's name was in the 1951 census, or your name or your relative's name would have been in the voters list prior to Bangladesh's liberation. So prior to the liberation, prior to 24th March 1971, which is when Bangladesh became liberated, right? So you had to prove that you were living in India, your families were living in India, your name was on the voter list, some form of identity before 24th March 1971. Okay. If you were able to prove this, then your name would have been in the NRC. Otherwise, your name would have not been in the NRC, right? Now, this Supreme Court order actually came in 2013, started getting implemented from 14 onwards, took about 5 years, took approximately 1,220 crores to conduct this exercise, and of course, a list was released. Right now, of course, we understand that most of these people who would have been on the list would have also been Muslims. So there is absolutely no qualms about it. Now let us understand where are the problems. This is where CAA comes in, because let us say this list came out in 2019. Let us say you are a Hindu who illegally migrated from Bangladesh in say 1980. Now technically you become an illegal migrant, but when you apply CA 2019 to this, that means you will become a legal migrant, and you've been living since 1980, so you will automatically be eligible for Indian citizenship because you've been living here for more than 5 years. So the only people who would really be excluded out of this process are going to be Muslims. Everybody else would be made a legal migrant as per CAA. Only the Muslims, because they come from Bangladesh, will not be, and they will continue to be illegal migrants, which is why then they get transported to detention camps where they can start challenging if they want to. There was a separate foreigners tribunal which was set up. Okay, a foreigners tribunal which was set up. And this is largely what the CA plus NRC problem is. It's never just about the CA, it's about CA plus NRC. Now there are of course some issues that this process of appeal is very complex. To how can ordinary people from such low economic socio-economic status give you such technical details? That is why the whole "hum kagaz nahi dikhayenge" movement gained such public traction. Also, you must understand that all of this is a huge coordination. You require the Election Commission of India to help you with electoral rolls. You require security forces. You require infrastructure. You also require the census board to help you, Assam border police, foreigner tribunals. There's a complete lack of coordination on that front. Second, what are you going to do now? Are you going to send them back to Bangladesh? If you do that, then relations between Bangladesh and India might get soured, because Bangladesh would say, we don't want them back. They didn't want to live here in the first place. It is okay. And therefore diplomatic issues will happen. And third, the whole process of re-verification at the tribunals is extremely complex. And therefore it becomes very difficult for an ordinary person with limited means to really go against the magnanimity of the state. And the right way to go about this would be, alright, the law is the law, that fine, if you're not a citizen, you're not a citizen. But you should equally distribute these people across the states, give them the status of workers, give them working rights, let them work, let them earn a living, let them contribute to the development of the country, and then we can figure out what needs to be done once our diplomatic arrangements have been taken into account. So this is how it is. This is what the CA debate is. This is what the NRC debate is, and this is how it has to be done. Anything beyond this is honestly not relevant as far as the exam is concerned. Okay, thank you.